So, Jen,
Hi.
welcome to the engine room.
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure to have you here. It's one of those podcasts that I started because having sat in-house and having been primarily a specialist, right? When I was like searching for knowledge, how to navigate like my career and stuff, and how to do specific things, I always thought that it was a little bit high level, right? It was like meant for the bridge or for, I made the analogy to a ship, right? So the bridge of a ship, and I've always been sitting in the engine room, right? Why is there nothing for me? So having been frustrated with that, I was like, okay, you know what? I got to do it myself, right? I got to talk to these people who I see as having an important opinion on certain topics, and then we're going to dive into the nitty gritties, right? No shame.
Yes.
So
The good, the bad, the ugly.
good, the bad. Today, we're so fortunate to speak about a topic that's haunting a lot of people. But before we get to that, why don't you introduce yourself?
What a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jen Montague, and I am the Vice President of Growth at Onomondo, and I have been doing the Marketing Corner podcast with Casper for 4 years now.
Oh.
4 years, I think. So a lot's changed in our personal lives. I've had 2 children. He's had another child. He started SparkForce, which has been really exciting to watch. So, and also during that time, obviously, a lot of things have changed in the world,
Right.
in technology, in marketing. So, yeah, we've been kind of in the engine room ourselves, navigating all these changes. And I'm excited to, dig deep on a specific topic with you today.
Let's try it. This topic is not so much us really going into the nitty gritties of the marketing engine room, right? It's actually surrounding that. And the topic is, how do you hire a proper agency to take care of your B2B marketing? There's a lot of pitfalls here.
Yes.
And there's a lot of actors, both good and bad, potentially, right, in the space, not just in Copenhagen, but across the board. And having had the opportunity to hire an agency previously, but I decided not to. I was like, no, if I don't know Google Ads, I'm just going to go learn that, right?
Right.
Obviously, it cannot happen everywhere, and nobody can expect anyone to be capable of doing everything, right? So we hire agencies. So what's that looking like for you, agencies versus in-house? How's your situation been throughout your career with that topic?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. And obviously, you're coming from the agency perspective now. I'm an in-house. And that's one of the things on our podcast. I think that in Marketing Corner is a very interesting dynamic because, much like you, I want everything in-house.
Yeah.
And that leads to very big teams.
Right.
And we're living in a time now where we can't really have big teams. So how do we balance getting what we need out of an agency, but also making sure that we stay true to our brand, that we can act quickly, that we can get what we need done to succeed.
Yeah.
And I guess the pitfalls that I've experienced when I've worked with agencies is, one, the pricing model. So I've worked with agencies where their price is based on a percentage of my ad spend, and that therefore incentivizes them to make me spend more, right? Because they're going to want more money. And that always felt counterintuitive to me. I mean, I don't mind spending money if it's working, but I don't want an agency whose whole entire business model is based on me spending more money.
Right.
So that's one barrier that I've had when I worked with agencies. I think the other is speed in reacting. You know, I've worked with web agencies, for example, who help us improve our website. And you submit a ticket and they say, we'll get back to you in 2 to 3 days. And you wait, and then they do the change and it's not what you had in mind. And
back and forth.
Back and forth and back and forth. And so I was like, okay, I want my own web developer, right? And then you sort of take more and more in-house. And I think the last one, maybe the more interesting one, is there can be a quality issue. And that's not because necessarily agencies are bad, but like if you're in a highly specialized industry, like we're IoT, we have very specific technologies, we have networks and devices, and it's super in-depth, and it's going to be really hard to find an agency who can create the in-depth kind of content that our target market would expect.
Right.
Whereas we would probably be better in-house with an in-house expert who can write, but that will take longer.
Right.
So it's kind of this balancing act of quantity and velocity versus quality. And so I think those are some of the reasons you try to stay in-house, but a prediction that I have for 2025 is that we're going to see a lot more outsourcing because I think headcounts are getting smaller.
Yeah.
So how do we balance the needs of the business with the right agencies and making sure that we get what we need from an agency? And I think the other thing, sorry,
Go ahead.
just off the top of my head is in B2B, we have long sales cycles. So if you were to optimize my Google ads, but I want it optimized for 1 customers,
Right.
I'm going to wait up to a month, 12 months
Yeah.
to find out if that thing that you did worked. And how do I then know if my agency is actually working well?
Yeah.
It's a really long cycle. So there's a lot going against agencies, I think.
Yeah.
But also the thing you have going for you is you can execute relatively quickly on high level stuff that, can save a headcount.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind talking about it, how did things progress at Onamando? I've been following along the sidelines. I used to be in IoT myself,
Okay.
so I know the struggle of the technicalities.
Yes.
But how did you manage your decisions, hiring in-house versus then potentially looking at an agency, right? Because obviously, at one point, you had 2 paths.
Yes.
So what happened there?
So we started, I was marketer number 3 on the team. We are now 14.
Okay.
So we went very big team.
Yeah.
And that is also because I have a preference for things in-house because I want to execute quickly, I want it on brand, and I think I'd rather have those people around me.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's expensive. It can be clunky
Yeah.
to have so many people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, back to the journey. So we had an agency doing our Google ads, we had an agency doing our website, and then we had a PR agency.
Okay.
So those are kind of the 3 external agencies. Oh, and a video agency.
Right.
So those are the 4 agencies that we worked with. And PR is something I would always outsource because they have the connections in the network. It's something that is really hard to get unless you're already embedded in that industry. So I would always recommend a PR agency if you decide to go down the PR route. It's expensive. It's not attributable.
Yeah.
So
It is what it is.
it is what it is. I find it successful, but sometimes I have a hard time getting the blessings from above that they're happy with that kind of spend. That's probably a different podcast.
Future episode.
Future episode. The web agency that we were using, that was probably the most frustrating for the exact reasons I said. We would see something wrong on the website or the formatting or something wasn't loading or the site speed would go super slow, which obviously impacts our SEO. It impacts our rankings and, it really has a negative impact on our ability to do our jobs. And it would be submit a ticket. And then, when we would wait in the queue and then something would get changed. And they were talking, I think, to someone in Poland who would make the change and then they'd show it to us. And it was just waiting back and forth. It was just really not good. And when we'd say this isn't what we had in mind, then they would get frustrated with us. And it was really completely clashing because we didn't know how to speak to them in a way they understood, and they were not speaking in a way we could understand. And so I brought in an in-house person, and that our website obviously took off because that person was sitting next to us and we could say, change this, change that, and he would just beep, boop, beep, boop, pop. And he would change it in front of me, and if I didn't like it, he'd change it again.
Right.
The Google ads, I 100% can see the benefit of outsourcing that, but we ran into the same problems as I mentioned earlier. So they were being optimized for clicks. I didn't want to optimize for clicks. I want to optimize for close won. But how do you do that when you have up to a 12-month sales cycle? That's really, really hard to do. So the agency obviously was having a hard time doing that. They also didn't understand our industry that well. So the converting keywords, when you work with SIM cards, there's IoT SIM cards, and then there's the SIM cards that you and I put in our phone when we go on holiday. Not the same thing. But to the agency, they were like, oh, we've got a lot of clicks on SIM cards. We should put more money there. And it's like, that's not what we want, right? So they didn't understand our industry well enough to optimize our ads for the kind of people and the kind of search terms that we were looking for. So that's also why I decided to bring that in-house. And that was a decision I made. But then, then I have a big, expensive team. And then that's harder to justify, right? And then more expectations come in your head. So that was kind of the journey of that.
Do you think at some point there is some sort of knowledge gap? I mean, obviously there has to be between B2C / B2B agencies and specialized B2B agencies, right? Because what it sounds to me like is that some of these agencies perhaps didn't manage to onboard themselves well enough, or it was, you know, like a sub-department of, let's say, Google Ads, where we do Google Ads, but we don't necessarily know the details of the B2B aspect, right? Same running, I mean, LinkedIn, obviously mostly B2B, but same thing with Meta ads. How do you see that typically play out? Because we have a lot of, I mean, even I still get like agency offers. It's like, dude, I'm in an agency myself now, so, you know, don't go
so
there.
their targeting is a little off.
Little off, but, you know, we'll accept it.
Yeah.
So if people are getting bombarded with, you know, offers about agency this, agency that, do you have any sort of advice on how to sort of navigate that? Because let's say you're a head of marketing, right? And you don't necessarily know all the details yourself. How are you going to figure out if they're lying or if they're telling, you know, untrue things?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. I think that the difficulty, you know, we have in-house is they can promise me everything. You know, we've seen a 30% uptick in conversions.
Right.
Well, you have to know what questions to ask, what kind of conversions, what are the goals that you are, and the events that you're setting up tracking for. You also have to, you know, in-house, you have to understand your sales cycle. You have to understand your ICP. You have to understand, you know, you have to, an agency, it's almost like AI. Like you're only as good as the information we give you. If we give you shit information, we're going to get shit back, right? So I think maybe there's a breakdown in understanding what an agency needs to know to be successful. I think agencies, you have it tough because you have to be subject matter experts in something, you know, and if you have 50 clients, you have to be subject matter experts in 50 things, to know the top converting keywords, to know the segments, to know the geographies, or, you know, what kind of images to use, whatever it is that you're focusing on. We hire you to know that. But how are you supposed to know the inner workings of IoT or customer support software or scheduling software, or, you know, like there's so many different areas that you need to know. So I think first and foremost, it's kind of understanding what we can expect from each other. There has to be a good handover, but there also has to be, you know, there's going to be cases, I'm sure you get customers who are like, we have no idea what to do.
Sure do.
You know, so how can you help them? So it's setting up the, how do we communicate? What does good look like? What are we expecting? What's reasonable? I think is a really important question to ask from both sides. Because that's, sometimes I liken it to like you're building a train track from opposite sides of a bridge, right? Or, you know, and then you find when you get here, you're misaligned. And by that point, it's too late. The agencies failed. They didn't live up to the promise. Well, that customer was difficult. And then that relationship is ruined.
And then you fire them maybe, and you go for new ones. Maybe same thing repeats.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I saw. You know, I've worked with a lot of agencies in my career, and it was always the same thing. You know, it was something that started off well. Yeah, great, you're going to help us out. And it's also, you know, when you're starting building your marketing team, you don't know what good looks like in your own team. You know, and that's something I get brought in usually to set stuff up, to build the machine, get it predictable, and then, you know, let it scale. I don't know what good looks like right away. I don't know what that top converting keyword is yet because we haven't done this before. You know, at Onamundo, I took over where there wasn't a lot of stuff done because there wasn't a lot of resources. So I needed an agency, and I said, do what you think, get that ball rolling, and then start showing me some data of what's working. So I think, hopefully I'm answering your question. I kind of went a little bit off, but I think it's difficult for both teams to understand what they can expect from each other. And agencies tend to overpromise a little bit because you need to stand out, right? You need to make those grand claims of, we can increase this by this much. And then I think marketers, especially new, more green marketers, were like, great, that's what I need to do. So let's just figure this out. And then you got a bunch of clicks that mean absolutely nothing. So how do we, it's kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah, one interesting point there is especially if you don't necessarily know yourself what good looks like, right? Then you need to have this sort of runway period where you can't really fault the agency. But even then, knowing that results, I mean, I just spoke about account-based marketing with Ethan, right? We agreed upon the fact that historically, when we've run it, and what we tell clients nowadays is that 6 to 9 months, right?
Yeah.
Depending on ACV and depending on deal cycles and whatnot. But you got to be able to make that investment. Otherwise, it's not really fair to you or to us, right?
Yes. And it's a time investment. That's the thing, that people don't want to wait.
Yeah.
I hired an agency, you're the best,
Yeah.
get me results. And yeah, it is 6 to 9 months. That's the result. It's the same with SEO. You know, when we wanted to rank organically, you know, it's like, well, it takes a long time. I can't hire a content writer and then all of a sudden we're doubling our traffic organically. It doesn't work that way. So I think what it all boils down to, Magnus, is the pressure from above.
True.
Right? And that's something that goes for targets, that goes for expectations. You know, you have a board of directors coming to your C-level saying, we want to see this kind of growth. The C-level go to your head of marketing and says, you need to make this level of growth because I have to show them something. And that marketing person is going to go to you and say, I need to see this level of growth and I needed it yesterday. You know, so shit rolls downhill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, I have been there.
Yes.
And I think, you know, that was ultimately also why I decided to go the agency route, right? Because having sat as let's say a growth lead, right, in 2 B2B SaaS companies and not necessarily knowing what good looks like across the board, right?
Yeah.
So you get some sort of expectation and I was like, okay, I gotta learn from the best in the business. That's why I went to SparkForce because that's how I saw it, right?
Right.
So I've always thought of the fact that if I ever go in-house again, which who knows when it will happen, if it happens, right? I would want an agency like SparkForce because I know that they're specialized. I know that Casper has been sitting in-house, right?
Yes.
And each of us, we sort of have that possibility to contribute in ways. I mean, me having sat in-house myself. And I think that's the importance where if you have agencies, and the point I want to get to is red flags. If you have agencies where you almost have to interview them, like you would hire for in-house roles.
Yes, yes.
Because you may talk to the very suave salesperson, or you may talk to the senior. Odds are the task will be given to a junior. Very normal, right?
Yes,
Very
yes.
normal. Doesn't happen here, FYI. So let's talk about red flags. I've said mine. Suave salesperson, obviously, case in point, they could be good people, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you got to be able to see the entire team, right? Don't bring in somebody that I haven't met yet.
Right.
Show me everybody here. Yeah. But what's your takes?
I think the first thing you can see, you know, on the website before you start talking is the pricing model. How do you make your money? If you make your money, and that's one of the things we talked about on the podcast, and then Casper changed your pricing model. Not because of me, but, you know, we talked about on the podcast was making it project-based. You know, and adding those kind of power-ups, I think they're called, right? These little extras. It's kind of a project-based thing, as opposed to if you spend this, we're going to charge you that much.
Right.
That's my first thing that I look for. Are you going to charge me based on what I spend, or are you going to give me this is a one-off fee or whatever that might be, or a retainer that is transparent? That's red flag for me, number one. And then number two, I'd love to meet the team. I want to know what your background is, at least in tech. If I'm in the tech field, do you have technical people who understand tech? What other tech clients do you have? Yeah. I've used agencies sometimes because our competitors have used them. So I'm like, okay, they must have someone in-house who knows enough about this industry. Not that of course, there's conflict of interest. They didn't tell us what the other people are bidding, or, you know, it wasn't anything like that.
True, yeah.
But I just knew, okay, so you're doing this for other people in this field.
Yeah.
That was a very green flag. But if there's no one in-house who can do that, then that's a little
iffy.
A little iffy, especially if you're in a very specialist field.
Right.
And I think the other red flag for me is just like promises that seem too good to be true. And, you know, we've been doing this a long time. If someone tells me they're going to double my SEO in 3 months, I know they're full of shit, right? I know that it takes longer than that to do this properly. If you're going to increase my conversion rate by 30% within the first, 2 months, I'm going to call bullshit, because I don't think that that's possible, because I've been doing it. I'm a seasoned marketer. I'm not new to this. So I'm not coming at you going, okay, great, that sounds wonderful. I'm going, yeah. So that's for me. Maybe those are my flags.
Okay. So bogus claims, if the team does not have experience within the field, and think, yeah, those two, I guess, are the primary ones, right?
Yeah, kind of overpromising or just kind of overselling themselves.
I mean, in general, in B2B marketing, any promise is, it's like trying to do predictions, right, for 2025.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Where I thought at some point that people knew, like people in higher seniorities than I am, right? I was like, wow, you guys really know. Nope.
No. Yeah,
It's just, you know, we hope we go down that path, but if we don't, it's not necessarily that it's not okay, right? But then why are we not going that direction? But I think that's also important. I think one thing I see out there a lot is, especially with 2025, and obviously you predicting that trend with a potential downsizing happening in in-house teams, right? We see a lot of fractional CMOs,
yes,
fractional head of marketing and whatnot, and they have a choice, right? Do I hire an agency and I am then the strategist, right? I just, outsource. Or do I try to hire an in-house team? Let's say that you were in a new B2B SaaS company and you were hired as the CMO or the VP of marketing. What kind of thoughts would you have going into this? And at what point would you be looking at either in-house or potentially outsourcing?
I think that's a really great question. I think there's certain things that I would never outsource.
Right.
For example, your social media. I think that needs to be internal. I think that needs to be your voice. And I find that unless you find someone who's really good at it, I would rather keep that in-house. That person who's going to talk about what you're doing today and what it's like to work there and stuff. I think it may be more authentic.
Yeah.
At least on LinkedIn. Maybe, I know Twitter, you can buy some funny people to tweet for you, or X or whatever the hell it is now. No one's on it anymore. Go on.
No.
Don't get on X anymore. No. Different podcast. But I would like to keep that in-house.
Yeah.
Website, I guess, just because of my experience. But I guess it depends. The question would be, what's the size of the team? What's the competencies of the team? If there's already a team of 3, 4, 5 people who are running pretty well, then I would probably keep it in-house, or I would bring in an agency for PR, or maybe extra content, upper funnel. Doesn't have to be too deep content.
Yeah.
I've hired agencies before to help me do surveys and things like that.
Yeah.
So if it's building everything from scratch, I would probably outsource most tasks as I get to grips with what's working and what's not. Kind of like what I did at Anamundo. So keeping a digital ads agency on standby, doing stuff, meeting with them monthly, what's working, what's not working, and then from there, taking those learnings, building up my own knowledge, and then probably pulling away from the agency, because that's kind of also what happens, I think, for an agency eventually.
Right.
Is that maybe they get those in-house competencies, and maybe I don't know if people stay with agencies for the duration of their entire business.
Yep.
But that's probably I would probably outsource ads and maybe website to begin with. And then if I can build those competencies in-house, I would probably move it in-house if I could.
What if you were to hire an agency, right? For example, I can only speak for SparkForce, but we have a pretty substantial onboarding. And we really try and get into the nitty-gritties of it. So let's say that you requested an audit, we sort of get into the onboarding, and then you meet a lot of, not criticism, right? But you meet differing opinions from us based on your current maybe go-to-market tactics. How would you perceive that, right? We're obviously not trying to be mean.
No.
But we have our own experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that may happen sometimes where we go into these sessions and we have a little, our stomachs are a little, because we know this is...
Something doesn't smell right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like something is obviously, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your take on that.
I think I know why you're asking this. I would say I'm hiring you for that.
Yeah.
I want your opinion. You've done this before, so I would want that. But I can completely, having worked in some companies that I've worked in, I can see them going, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Even in an in-house, right? You've been in-house.
Right.
I've been hired for my expertise, and I would say maybe 50% of the time I'm listened to.
That's very accurate.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but you hired me for my opinion. I'm giving you my opinion, but it's up to you whether, you decide. And I think it's very similar for agencies.
Yeah.
I think that I don't want to sound critical of the startup scene. I think there's some really great startups out there, but I also think there's some particular founders who maybe see themselves as the next Zuck or the next Elon, and so they know everything and they know what they want to do. And it's an interesting balance, right? Because they say to be successful as a CEO, as a founder, you have to have a little bit of psychopath. You heard that, right? And that's no shade to the CEOs out there. That's just, you have to be driven. You have to kind of not give a shit what people say. So I think there's some that maybe pride themselves too much on, I'm the wonder kid, I'm going to do the thing differently, and this is my vision. And I think you can count on one hand the amount of times that works. And there's probably no limit to the amount of times it hasn't worked. And so I think that's always going to be difficult for an agency and for anyone who's hired to tell them no. You're always going to come up against someone who's like, I know. You know, and I'll give you an anecdotal example. I worked for a company who they had a certain brand color. And I don't want to say what it is because then it will give away the company, and I don't want to do that because they were great. But a certain color, I A/B tested the impact of this color on buttons to CTAs. And I found a 5% increase in conversions on a green button as opposed to the brand color. And so I said to the CEO, I think we should change all the buttons to green because we see, and there's studies done that the color green means go, and it gives you an endorphin. You know, there's also neuromarketing science behind it. I think we should do this. And he was like, no, that's against our brand. This is our brand. Keep it this. So it went against my advice, but it's his call, right? And what I actually did was I wrote to him on Slack and I said, I just want in writing that you are okay with a 5% dip in conversions if we keep things this color.
Oh, sneaky.
And he said yes. So I kind of covered my ass where I was like, okay, that's fine. And we agreed on it. And we didn't see a dip, but we didn't see a huge increase. But it was, you know, so my expertise came forward. I had data to show that this is what we should be doing. But he had a vision, and he went with his vision. And what can I do? I'm not going to go and turn all the buttons green behind his back. So that's
maybe a good tip.
Yeah, but I got it in writing.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Because the way that I've typically approached these things is that, you know, I'm like, at the end of the day, as you said, right, we are hired for our expertise. And if that expertise is not listened to, it may happen to, you know, to some people, not saying me, some people, we can become a little sour, right? But instead of then becoming sour, I think what you say is making a lot of sense, and it's kind of off topic, but it is a good tip, right? Are you okay with not making this change?
Yes.
I really like that. That's a good learning.
This is the impact of not doing it.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. And even for an agency, right? It may be a tip for other agencies out there.
Hot
if
tip.
you then, because what I was, one of my final questions here is, back when I was sitting in-house, I started at an agency, then I had 3 roles in-house, and now I'm here. One of the things I've always been very, like, been kind of, I found it suspicious is that an agency will always find something wrong. And I've always thought of it as, I mean, clearly you guys are just out to get some new business, right? It's obvious. You're gonna flag anything. I'm using exact match on Google Ads. You should use broad.
Right.
Which is it's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that, please. Unless you're B2C and you're looking broad. But
if you have Timu's budget, sure, go ahead. But honesty then for you, right? Like, so if an agency points out something wrong, obviously nothing should just be believed at face value. But have you encountered that? Or is it just me who's a little suspicious that when something is pointed out wrong, right? Or maybe if an agency says, you're actually doing quite okay. Sometimes we do that here, where it's like, you know, a person may just want to get an audit, which is free, by the way. And
great idea, by the way.
I did that.
Great initiative.
Before I worked here, I requested an audit from Casper because I was very confused about whether I was doing things right or wrong. Obviously, I trust my gut, I trust my expertise, but it is difficult being, you know, a sole marketeer in a company. Maybe I was the only one in growth. Maybe you're the only one in growth, and then it's like, I have no benchmarks, right?
Right.
So I asked Casper, and Casper said, I think you're actually doing pretty good there.
Yeah.
I would maybe just change, you know, this little thing here, but otherwise I think you're just great. It's something else. It might be, you know, might be something else. And I was like, oh dear, right? Yeah. And it sort of gave me that appetite for I mean, I wished I would have had the budget to hire an agency at that point, because I think it's where you could sort of learn. Nobody says you have to be a part of it for half a year, but if you don't have the capabilities yourself, right,
Yeah.
that may work. But what I'm curious about is your take on agencies finding something wrong, right?
That's a hard one, right? Because that's how you prove your value, right? This is the
In
thing that
essence.
we're going to do. This is what we're going to help you with. I have another anecdote about that, but I think there's certain ways to go about it. And the anecdote is I got because again, I get contacted all the bloody time. Are you looking for someone who can, don't add me on LinkedIn and then pitch to me immediately. I hate it. I hate it. It makes me just not want to deal with you. And I've started replying to people. I'm like, just adding you on LinkedIn does not make me a warm lead. So don't do that. That's red flag number one. Because I really don't like that. But one thing I had, and this sticks to me, this was years ago, where someone said, we just ran an audit on your website, and do you know that all your tracking is off?
Oh.
And I was like, oh shit.
That's not good.
So I contact my marketing ops person, and I'm like, apparently our tracking is off. And so he contacts our web person, and the three of us are going through, and we're like, no, that all our events and all our tags and, you know, everything seems fine. And then we went, son of a bitch. It was an agency who's like, we could fix that for you. And what pissed me off about that is, one, I fell for it. But two, it took three of us a couple of hours of our day going through our website to find out what was wrong. And I just replied to this person saying, that was sneaky, that was unprofessional, I will never use you, because that is not okay, what you just did. And they were like, sorry, we misread the information. And they never contacted me again. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. But I think it depends, because again, from my point of view, that's why I'm hiring you. What am I missing? Where's my blind spot? What can I do better? So if you find that and identify it, that's great. I'm more open to that. But I guess it depends on the delivery of one thing we think that could be improved is this, because what we've seen in other customers is this and this and this. So if we were to I know you can't show all the cards up your sleeve until you have that signature on the contract, but there needs to be a little meat on it. It has to be something that maybe I'm like, that is an area that I don't know that well. You know, if you were to present to me that I'm doing my LinkedIn ads wrong, which is something that I know really well, I would probably be like, what? But if you said your SEO's off, I'd probably be like, okay, I probably.
But wouldn't you then also agree, and I think this is my final question, that times have changed, right? Personal anecdote for me, when I was sitting in-house, if I got approached, it's almost like dating, isn't it? If I got approached, I would be like, my defense would be up, and the alarm bells were ringing. Whoa, 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 slowly roll, hold your horses. The way I found Casper and then also Frederick, right, was actually just through their LinkedIn posts.
Yes.
I engaged with them. If they looked in Dream Data, they would have seen me just like impression. And
shout out to Dream Data.
Shout out to Dream Data. If you don't have it, I mean, saved my ass when I was sitting in-house.
Yes.
Not because marketing should fight to exist. And that's a different episode. But it does help to figure out where you should,
Yes. I fought for 2.5 years to get a multi-touch attribution and not a first touch for the exact same reason. But that's a different
episode.
Yes. Sorry.
But how I found them and how, there was certainly no pressure, right? It was me approaching Casper. Suddenly, I was like, he was in a position of power to say, no, I can't help you.
I don't have any time.
I don't have any time, right? And I was like almost begging, please help me. And I think that really, stews the way that this interaction works in favor of actually both parties, right? And I guess that's also sort of, social selling nowadays.
Yes, that's the power of social selling right there.
Right there, right? But I would then also say if an agency approaches you, obviously all of them do not have to be pressured on making some sort of, delivery or, but I will actually say it's a red flag, at least for me, right? If you do not engage with people organically or, maybe Casper, he would promote his posts. I would still find him. He would be giving away his playbook, which would in turn promote trust, right?
Yes.
And then at one point when I'm ready, it's just same as selling, right? I'm there.
You're there.
Would you agree with that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Only because I'm going to put my sales hat on.
Okay.
I have a target to hit.
Right.
And that's the thing we forget, when we're in marketing, because it's also similar to like, don't gate anything. Give it away. Give it away and they'll come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when? I need,
You need it right now.
because shit rolls downhill.
Right.
My target is monthly. I need to close this by the end of this month. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to hit every single person on LinkedIn. I'm going to go through my CRM. I'm going to find every agency. I'm going to email them 8 times. Because that's what they have to do to hit their target. So I agree with you that I would much rather follow a LinkedIn, a marketer like Casper and go, God, he speaks sense. He has a really good point. Oh, they're doing a free audit. Let me try that free audit. 100%, that is the way to go. The only other thing that makes that hard to adopt is there is a target that people have to hit and they have to close business, and that means there needs to be some set of urgency.
Yeah.
So it can be really hard to just hand over the keys to the castle and just wait for them to come, because you could take 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. We worked, when I looked at my dream data at a previous role, I saw a customer, we had 97 touch points with that individual. They ignored every email from sales, but they engaged with our content over and over and over again, and it took them like 3-4 months, but they came in. So I know that's the best way to do it, but I see a very big clash with how legacy processes are in place within a commercial function.
Yep.
And that's the problem.
Yep.
And that's where my hill I'm going to die on is we need to start making common sense. We need to stop putting a number every month of meetings that you need to book. We need to start looking at revenue at the end of a quarter. We need to start working with sales. We need to look at an all-bound model rather than, was it inbound or outbound? It should be both.
Yeah.
And that is agency, that is in-house, that is everywhere, because I 100% agree with you. I want to see your playbook. I want to see what you do. And then if I'm ready, when I'm ready, I will come to you.
Yeah.
But if I put my sales hat on, I don't have time to wait. I need to create that urgency.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in.
That is the world we live in. So in essence, we respect the hustle of all our sales colleagues out there. We know why you guys are doing it.
Yeah. Which sucks.
Which sucks, right? But you're doing your best. With
doing
that
what you have
said,
to do.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's livelihood.
Yes.
But with that said, if you're then, and that's why, it was such a great topic to discuss with you, if you're then the marketing person and you get approached, right? Look at their experience, right? Look at their pricing model, if that's really important to you. Is it, is it ad spend? Is it per channel? Is it something else? And just, interview them a little bit, right? Figure out, do they know your field? And then also ask them what is realistic here. If they overpromise, most likely they're going to underdeliver, right? So, and speak to your peers.
Yes, definitely ask around, word of mouth.
Ask around, yeah.
And if I were to flip it around for like, what should an agency do, right? I think what Casper's doing is very smart. I know a lot of the business comes through his LinkedIn, right now, just because it's how he started the business. So social selling, get out there, start talking about stuff, drip some stuff out that is going to be interesting to me. Let me engage with you. But again, this could take time.
Yeah.
If you're going to approach me cold unsolicited email or don't call me, no phone calls, email me. LinkedIn me, right? Don't call. No, I'm a millennial. Like, my phone's ringing.
Somebody random calling me in the trash.
Don't call. But I think it, personalize it. When people are like, "Are you looking to up?" I'm like, that AI wrote that. Just say, hey, "I really like this post that you did about this.
Yeah.
I really think that people are getting this wrong, and this is something that I think we could do for you better." Or something. Just act like you know who I am and what I do and what my problem is. Because a lot of us marketers, we have the same issues. We all kind of have the same issues. I know with AI, there's new things popping up. But at the end of the day, it's the shit rolling downhill. It's the attribution. It's showing my value. It's how do I get branding to be measured. And all of that is still universal for all marketers. So we want to fix that. Help us create value. Help us show our value. I think that's the outreach approach I would take. I would say, hey, Magnus, I see that you worked here and I see that you've done this. And did you have this problem before? Because this is something we've seen. Yeah. I think that would be a lot more powerful than the generic copy-paste bullshit. Dear sir or madam, are you interested in this? Yeah.
I agree. And let's that be the final comment, because I think it's the perfect end
Good
note.
end.
Thank you so much for participating, Jen.
Thank you for
It was a
having me.
pleasure.
Yes, likewise. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Magnus. Appreciate it.